All right, and we are live. We're just going to wait a little bit for a couple folks to tune in here. This is the White Lotus of Light Shadow Wars live stream, and we are going to be talking about a lot of interesting stuff today. Oops, I want to see if the live stream is on here. Looks like it is. Good deal. We got 2 watching. Feel free to throw something in the chat there, and we can go from there. And so I'm just going to wait till we get a few more folks on here. Man, there has been so much lately that I just can't even keep up at all. It's just been absolutely out of hand. And this, according to the angels, is just the prelude to much, much bigger things. And I'm really excited. I'm not naive to the fact that these are very dangerous historical forces at play. Quite the opposite. Obviously, I'm well aware of that. But it is exciting to see things start to shift. And, one of the things, someone left a comment the other day, and I actually wonder if that person didn't decide to unsubscribe, because I was kind of shocked with my most recent video, which I thought was really excellent. The worm has begun to turn. I somehow lost a sub on that. You never know if it's someone who thought that they were not subscribed and then they subscribed, or what exactly it is that you say that causes it. I do know that when I talk about flat Earth negatively, I always lose subscribers, which is a bummer, but it is what it is. But I'm not exactly certain what caused it, but I suspect someone left a comment saying, I hate to be that guy, but Javier Milei down in Argentina, who had just won, that he's a WEF guy. And that is certainly true. And I'm not naive by any stretch of the imagination that the WEF is a bad organization. What people don't seem to understand is that actually the Luciferians have penetrated the Malachians. That's what's happening here, that the Satanists have been penetrated by the Luciferians long, long ago, and that they have a very long-term plan to take over from the Malachians. Again, some of these people are spiritual Luciferians, meaning they understand full well who and what they serve. And then there's others who are simply more at that Luciferian stage of consciousness. And so now that I got 7 people on here, I'm just going to go ahead and remind people I am doing a Black Friday sale. And the code for that's a 15% off on a natal chart. That's the first 40 years of life, or a Navamsa chart. That's the second 40 years of life. That expires tonight at midnight Pacific time. And, I feel that I have a number of different talents that God has given me, but probably among my very best is my Vedic astrology skills. And so you can help my family. And I will help yours by giving you tremendously insightful guidance. I've actually been having people start to put reviews even on my YouTube channel, but my work speaks for itself, and I consider it excellent. And you can also buy a package for family members, and it's 15% off. It's 15% off today only, and it's Black Friday 23 is the code. And I'm going to go ahead and put this up there. So Black Friday 23, it's 15% off. Actually, I got to write that again to have the amount. And I'm almost done with this. I just am saying this real quick. So it's off natal or Navamsa chart readings or spiritual guidance sessions. And so, yeah, if you're interested in getting a bit of guidance and learning a bit about your soul's karmas, I can see really deep things like, of course, romance, job opportunities, money, when you might have children, things like that. So one day only today. 15% off. Just use the code Black Friday 23. And of course, that's on whitelotusoflight.com. So enough with that. Let's launch into the show. I'm going to go ahead and keep that up for a little bit. And if you have any questions, I am going to do Q&A in the second half. We'll see what I can get to. People always have lots of questions. And so I don't have as much time today as I normally do. And so I will try and answer as many questions as I can, but I always answer super chats and super stickers. So thank you so much. So let's get started on this. So the first thing I want to talk about is, there's been some major happenings, of course, in Europe recently, and some that even happened since I did that last live stream where I said that, I didn't quite realize how fast the turnaround would be, but I did mention that I thought dominoes would start to fall in Europe, and they certainly have. But what I want to talk about is something that isn't that well known. So I often on this channel talk about the book from the 70s, The Report from Iron Mountain. And The Report from Iron Mountain is a book that was supposedly a leaked insider document, much like the infamous Silent Weapons for Silent Wars, which appears in the incredible book by William Cooper, Behold a Pale Horse, probably like one of the best of the modern era conspiracy theory books out there. It was written in the 1990s, predicted the school shootings, even though it came out before Columbine, which is a bit of a mind blower. And he said that they would use young men on psychiatric meds to shoot up schoolyards with specifically rifles in order to get people to get rid of rifles. So that's a classic, a conspiracy theory classic. Another one is The Report from Iron Mountain. And in The Report from Iron Mountain, they talk about methods to achieve world peace, right? World peace, ding, right? Which is just a code for a globalist takeover. Although I suspect the Luciferians and Malachians, I should mention this, and I don't know if I've made this clear. The Luciferians and Malachians are both globalists. They just believe in it in very different forms. The Malachians believe in this top-down control, massive depopulation. The only humans that are left are sex slaves or the Malachian Venetian black nobility elites, and that's it. And everyone else they get rid of, or they put brain chips in them and they harvest all the information that those people have up to the cloud and then use that to train cyborgs. That's their disgusting Malachian wet dream, to just sort of freeze everything in perpetual top-down slavery, right? The Luciferians are also globalists in that they want to bring the entire planet together in order to have the resources and technical know-how in order to become spacefaring. That's Lucifer's number one goal, not just Earth, especially since Earth has this cyclical thing, which isn't necessarily true in other parts of the galaxy, apparently. What Lucifer wants is a galactic empire. And Lucifer, along with some of the Hindu deities, interestingly enough, are interplanetary. Now, they have different names and different planets. They have different symbolic forms. If it's like, say, I'm just going to use example, but the Pleiades, and if they have merfolk on that, then Lucifer probably looks like a merfolk, right? I'm just giving an example. I'm not saying that specifically about the Pleiades, but the Luciferian consciousness is off the planet. And he wants humanity, because one of the things that's very unique and special about humanity apparently in the galaxy is that being a weird hodgepodge of, being genetically modified beings, right? And I'm not talking about the recent negative genetic modification. I'm talking about various different interstellar beings. Something very much like humans is out there. We possibly can even breed with them. I talk about that more in the Walter Bosley second interview I had with him, or conversation. So you can check that out if you're interested in that. But there's a lot of smoke that humans are genetically modified by extraterrestrials, right? Even if those extraterrestrials look very much like humans. And according to the information that I've got from the spirits, humans are particularly spiritually potent. We're like one of the most, if not the most spiritually potent beings in this galaxy. And that's why we get so much attention, even though we're way out on the outer edge of the spiral arm. Also, our location is apparently like kind of an intergalactic hot point between different galaxies. And so, and I realize all this stuff that I'm saying here is like mad speculative, and you can take it with a grain of salt, throw it in the trash. If it resonates, great. If not, I'm about to ground it in reality. I'm just explaining this concept of the Luciferians want to take this spiritual potency that humans have and take it off planet and take it to the rest of the galaxy. That's what Lucifer, the entity and being, wants. So in order to achieve that goal, we need to have high technology and a global civilization that continues to ramp up in terms of its technology. So they too are globalists, but they believe in a kinder, gentler globalism, which will have very heavy surveillance elements, but it will be a light touch. It'll be an invisible shackles around your neck. I mean, that's the entire point of Luciferianism in a certain sense. It's a false light leading you away from God, leading you away from the Most High. It looks way better than the pitch black of Malachianism, and I think it just objectively is better For one thing, they don't believe in the Epstein-style harm of children. So that's an immediate plus in their favor, right? That they don't want to harm kids in the way the Malachians do. Plus, they also believe in liberty and they believe in meritocracy, but they also are very eugenical, right? They believe in like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps or starve in the streets. They don't care. They're ruthless in that way. So they want to also have this global civilization, and they want to have technocracy, something, probably something between a republic and a technocratic elite, certainly a high-tech elite. They plan on having, all the same kind of surveillance stuff that the Malachians have, but just using a much lighter touch, using subtle psychological manipulation and incentives and extreme competition in order to generate control, rather than this overt, in-your-face, might makes right, that Orwell's boot, endlessly stamping on the face of humanity. That's the Malachian MO. So this document, the report from Iron Mountain, it's difficult to suss out whether it came from, I suspect it's a Luciferian outing the Malachian plan, and doing so disguised in a, it's kind of like a Russian nesting doll here. It's disguised as a real leak, right? But that was pretty quickly debunked. But the information is really solid. And in the report from Iron Mountain, they say there's 3 ways to create a global government. One of them is a pandemic. One of them is that there would be global climate catastrophes. Double. And the third one would be a faked alien invasion. So the reason I bring up the report from Iron Mountain here is that it's an example that we have of where the Luciferians have used, it seems, a revelation of the method that looks like something real, but is actually something fake, but it contains real information. I'm not sure if you stayed with me through that. So it comes out and the initial thing is, the report from Iron Mountain, it's leaked directly from some government think tank. Then that's debunked pretty quickly, but the information in it is on the money. Okay, do you see what I mean? So they present as real, as it's a real conspiracy. That's easily debunked, but the information in it isn't real, right? So it gets into that doublethink Luciferian confusion. On a similar token, there was a man named Leo Taxil in France in the late 1800s, and he claimed to have uncovered a Luciferian conspiracy within Masonry. And that included supposed plans from between Albert Pike, a 32nd degree Freemason in the U.S. There's 2 Albert Pikes that exist at the same time, so there's a lot of confusion about it. But I'm talking about the esoteric master, Albert Pike, 32nd degree Freemason, very learned. But supposed letters between him and Giuseppe Manzini, the founder of the Cosa Nostra, right? The Italian mafia, the Sicilian mafia. And supposedly Giuseppe Mazzini during this period of time was the head of the Illuminati. And they were discussing how there would be 3 world wars. And so I'm actually going to read you some interesting stuff that came out. Now, consider again that model of the report from Iron Mountain, wherein you have a fake conspiracy that reveals the real conspiracy. Okay? So this is some of the stuff that Leo Taxil wrote. Just one second, I'm going to take a sip of this coffee. He wrote, therefore, when the autocratic empire of Russia will become the citadel of papist Adonism, mind you, this is before the communist revolution in Russia when the Tsar still ruled. Adonism is the word that the supposedly, apocryphally, the Masons use for the Christian God, Adonai. We shall unleash the revolutionary nihilists and atheists. See any revolutionary nihilist and atheist stuff recently in the U.S. 2020, anyone? And provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which will demonstrate clearly to the nations in all its horror the effect of absolute unbelief. Mother of savagery and the bloodiest disorder, right? So think about this radical leftism. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves, keep that in mind, against the mad minority of revolutionaries will exterminate these destroyers of civilization. And the countless disillusioned Adonites, whose deists, right, believing in God's soul, have up until that time remained without a compass, thirsting for an ideal, but not knowing which God is worthy of tribute, will receive the true light by the universal manifestation of the pure Luciferian doctrine. At last made public, an event that will arise from a reactionary movement following the destruction of atheism and Adonaiism, together at the same time vanquished and exterminated. So atheism and the Abrahamic faiths largely wiped out. Okay? Now, again, you got to consider that this is a mixture of Luciferian and Malachian stuff in here, but some of this is fascinating. So he goes on to say, that which we must say to the world is that we worship a God, but is the God that one adores without superstition. What's the God of technology? Lucifer. To you, sovereign grand inspector generals, he attributed this to Pike. There's no evidence outside of this claim that Albert Pike, a 32nd degree Freemason in the South, very famous, was one of the main. He claimed to be a reincarnation of Jacques de Molay, the Templar Grand Master who was burned at the stake. Fascinating. So this is attributed to him, and it's apocryphal, and there's no evidence outside of what Taxil wrote. Okay, Leo Taxil. To you, sovereign grand inspectors general, we say this. You may repeat it to the brethren of the 32nd degree, 31st, and 30th degrees. The Masonic religion should be, by all of us initiates of the higher degrees, maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine. If Lucifer were not God, would Adonai and his priests calumniate him? Yes, Lucifer is God, and unfortunately, Adonai is also God. Interesting. For the eternal law is that there is no light without shade, no beauty without ugliness, no white without black. For the absolute can only exist as two gods, darkness being necessary for light to serve as its foil, as the pedestal is necessary to the statue, and the brake to the locomotive. Thus this is fascinating, because this is definitely a Luciferian doctrine, supposedly before the more modern formulation. So to my knowledge, this is the first place that this particular dichotomy is ever revealed. Thus, the doctrine of Satanism is a heresy, right? Because the Malachians want to destroy God and create atheism, whereas the Luciferians don't want to destroy God. They want to replace God, putting man and Lucifer at the center, right? The small s self, right? The Instagram model taking 1 million pictures of herself, the guy working out at the gym relentlessly or showing off with all his jewelry and fine clothing, how much money he has, right? Remember, Luciferians' Malachians' core tenet is self-hatred that they then project out to everyone. The core tenet of Luciferians is narcissism, and the core tenet of the Most High is self-love that then is projected out to everyone else. Not loving the self selfishly, but loving that inner spark given to us by God, known as the Atman in India, loving that, recognizing that, becoming one with God, and then being the peace and love that passes understanding, and basically becoming very much like Yeshua, Jesus. And that's what he was trying to teach us. So thus the doctrine of Satanism is and you can put Malachianism in there. Thus the doctrine of Malachianism is a heresy. And the true and pure philosophical religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Adonai. And Adonai you can just say is Yahweh, right? But Lucifer, God of light and God of good, that's their opinion, I don't agree, is struggling for humanity against Adonai, the God of darkness and evil. Now, they do often try and pitch that, oh, well, look at how horrible the, Crusades and stuff were. Like, oh, technology and like progressive Western thought, right? Western, which is very much a Luciferian thing, right? The Enlightenment and so forth. So then Leo Taxil then confessed that he made it all up, right? And he said some wild stuff in there, like they summoned Lucifer in physical form, that Lucifer was made manifest and turned into a crocodile and played the piano, just some crazy, silly shit in there. Although there could be some symbolic truth to what Taxil wrote, in the sense of if you read it symbolically rather than literally, there's some deep truth in there. He certainly had deep esoteric knowledge, this man. So he supposedly confessed, said, oh, all that's fake. Oh, none of that's true, right? And then 10 months later, he died. He wasn't a young man when he died, but he also wasn't like super old or anything. So interesting that he died. I wonder if he was killed. So later, another man picked up Taxil's torch, right? Leo Taxil's torch. There was actually a cardinal down in South America who picked it up, but there was also, more famously, a man named William Guy Carr, and I forget what his book was, something like The Pawns in the Chess Game or something like that. But anyways, he was a Canadian naval officer, and Thank you, by the way, Dave. And if you have any question, Dave, please go ahead and write it over there, and I'll definitely answer it. So he was a naval officer, and he also worked in Canadian intelligence during World War II. And mind you, World War II is probably the singular period of time to where the machinations of the Luciferians and the Malachians were most at the surface. And after that, like, history completely changes. The Malachians went towards memory holing and destroying information as much as they could. He published Checkmate in the North, a book about invasion by the Axis forces to take place in the Canadian Goose Bay. But he was involved in intelligence, so he was an insider. So he wrote this, right? And he claimed that Taxil had written this, although there's no evidence of that. But again, this looks to me like that Luciferian-style revelation of the method. He says this: Pike's plan was as simple as it proved effective. I'm going to take a sip here real quick. Talking about Albert Pike and these apocryphal 3 World War letters to Giuseppe Manzini. Now, this book was written in 1958. Pike's plan was as simple as it had proved effective. He required that communism, Nazism, political Zionism, and other international movements be organized and used to foment the 3 world wars and 3 major revolutions. The First World War was to be fought as to enable the Illuminati to overthrow the powers of the czars in Russia and turn that country into the stronghold of atheistic communism. Check. That was funded by the City of London and Wall Street, according to Anthony Sutton's research. The differences stirred up by agentur of the Illuminati, and you can just use the Illuminati here, just read it as Malachian. The differences stirred up between the agentur of the Malachians between the British and German empires were used to foment this war. After the war ended, communism was to be built up and used to destroy other governments and weaken religions. World War II was to be fomented by using the differences between fascists and political Zionists. That definitely happened. People don't realize that political Zionism was a thing since the 1800s. The World Jewish Congress was very much talking about Zionism for a long, long time before 1948, many decades. This war was to be fought so that Nazism would be destroyed and the power of political Nazism, so that Nazism would be destroyed and the power of political Zionism increased so that the sovereign state of Israel could be established in Palestine. During World War II, international communism was to be built up until it equaled in strength that of United Christendom. At this point, it was to be contained and kept in check until required for the final social cataclysm. Now, obviously, this guy got some things wrong, right? Like, he goes, can any informed person deny Roosevelt and Churchill did not put this policy into effect, right? And I'm just going to take an aside here now. This guy got some stuff wrong, right? Like, obviously, communism fell in 1991, and also the Nazis were not defeated. They simply went international. But he raises some really interesting points here. World War III is to be fomented by using the differences between the agentur of the Malachians, stir up between political Zionists and the leaders of the Muslim world. The war is to be directed in such a manner that Islam, the Arab world, including Mohammedism, and political Zionism, including the state of Israel, will destroy themselves, while at the same time the remaining nations, once more divided against each other in this issue, will be forced to fight themselves into a state of complete exhaustion mentally, physically, spiritually, and economically. Can any unbiased and reasoning person deny that the intrigue now going on in the Near, Middle, and Far East isn't designed to accomplish this devilish purpose? Quite insightful for 1958. My God, that was before the 7 Days War, for Christ's sakes. So this guy definitely knew something as an insider. Okay, so in the last episode, I said, I want you to keep that whole frame of these 3 world wars and whether this is revelation the method in mind while we look at things through this lens of the Luciferians versus the Malachians, right? So now in the last episode, I said that Europe was a Malachian stronghold and that Dominoes would have to fall for things to change there. Ended up being prophetic because literally the day after I said that, of course, Maloney had already won in Italy, but now 2 much bigger ones have happened. So, of course, we saw, I mentioned in the last episode, we saw Javier Milei down in Argentina win. And yes, he's WEF. Yes, it's Argentina. That's a stronghold of the post-war Nazi international. I know all that stuff. That's not new information to me, but that doesn't change my reasoning on things at all. So, hey, Alex, how's it going? So Alex is a former angelic. He just took an angelic magic class from me. Thanks for coming in, Alex. So I said Dominoes would fall in Europe. I did not realize literally in the next couple of days, but that's exactly what happened. So Geert Wilders, who is a far right figure in Holland, which is one of the most liberal countries in Europe, he has suddenly won. He's super anti-immigration. He's anti-globalist. He rails against them all the time, right? But he wants to move just like Trump did, just like Javier Milei says. They all want to move their country's respective embassies to Jerusalem. And they all are staunch supporters of Israel, despite being far right. Okay? So Geert Wilders wins in Holland. And then it just happened like today or yesterday or overnight. There has been one of the countries that's been the hardest hit by this Soros, Malachian, forced immigration of young fighting age men from North Africa and the Middle East into these countries, right, which was very much supported by Israel. Israel is right there pulling people out of the boat starting in 2015 openly, right, openly bringing Islamic people that they knew would be super riled up and angry into the European countries, people that did not in any way like those countries. Sure, there were some kids. There was that poor little boy who drowned. Yes, there were some women, but it was overwhelmingly like 85 or 90%. It just became more so over time. Young men of fighting age, and that's not a mistake. Soros is what do you call those NGOs down there have been, telling Muslim men to go move up there. They can have at the European women. They can just live on the dole. It's a buffet up there, right? And they appeal specifically to the people who are most radical. And of course, agents in those countries push those young men to go. So in Ireland has been particularly hard hit by this severe immigration of these people who are just not have zero plans in most cases. Of course, there's good people in these immigrants, and with all these things, like the people of these countries are innocent. Most of the people in even Israel, which is one of the more, nationalistic countries, there's millions of good people in Israel, and people need to keep that in mind and not start, saying all Islamic people are bad, right? Which the Geert Wilders guy, Javier Milei, and Trump and Meloni all kind of say that, right? Which isn't to or justify like the mass rapes that have been going on in Europe for like 20 years or whatever because of this forced migration. But there's these Ireland has been hit really hard, and they've been doing things like and this was happening in Sweden and other countries where when these Islamic migrants do a crime, the police just won't investigate it. They get the tap on the shoulder from the guys up above, and it never goes anywhere. In fact, this guy raped a woman, and the woman got like 30 grand. And then because he was 17 when he did it, he sued and he got like 300 grand. That happened in Norway. And that's just the two-tier justice. And it's designed to make Europeans hate Muslims, right? And not see the hidden hand of the people who are doing this. So Ireland just had these mass fiery riots that have never been seen before, probably since like the old days when the IRA was super active fighting against the British occupation. I mean, it's insane, the riots that are going on over there. So the dominoes are starting to fall. Freya just said they went left to turn hard right. We all need to be careful of getting played just like the left. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. People need to be aware. I will say, Freya, I did a lot of thinking about that recently. I mean, I've been thinking about this all along. I was concerned about a reactionary theocracy. But, I checked in with the angels for what it's worth, and people can take that with a grain of salt or not. And they said, no, what we've been telling you is correct. You'll see how it unfolds. What I believe is that the Malachians have the backup plan of going hard right if the left sweeping sea change wouldn't work, and that they plan to go hard right, just like Freya is saying, in order to enforce these Malachian goals, right? And use like super tight-fisted hard right kind of energy, right? And like I said, you'll notice that all these hard right people unequivocally support Israel in, the awful stuff that's going on in Gaza. No matter what you think about Israel and what happened on the 7th, which I condemn that, I also condemn the indiscriminate bombing of civilians. It's just, I don't accept that. Two wrongs do not make a right. Two war crimes do not make peace. You know what I mean? And I'm going to talk about that more. So we do need to be savvy and recognize that a hard right reactionary movement can be bad. I'm not worried about it from a geopolitical grand scale. I am worried about people getting overzealous locally, and brown people, Islamic people in particular, and also Jewish people getting hurt by a hard right reaction. Talking about innocent people on the ground have nothing to do with any of this. And that's indeed part of what they want to do here is they want to stir up two things. There's even, I think it was Netanyahu. There was some like hard right Zionist, super Zionist person who, is on board with that big plan to take over the entire Arabian Peninsula. I forget what it's called, the Ben Gurion plan or something like that. It was what they used in the document, A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm, which was a precursor to the Project for the New American Century, and that was written by Richard Pearl and all these, Israeli dual citizen hard right neocons wrote that. So watch the neocons go from left to hard right on a dime. Neocons always just happen to support whoever's in power. Isn't that interesting? But one of the plans that they said was they wanted there to be terror attacks by Islamic people, especially against Jewish people in synagogues in Europe, in order to frighten European Jews to move to Israel. Same thing with American Jews, to frighten them to move to Israel. And then Israel will be busting at the seams and, we have no choice but to take more Palestinian land and maybe expand into Syria and maybe expand over the entire peninsula, right? And we certainly want to take that gas and oil that's off the coast of Gaza that was just about to go into the hands of the Palestinian Authority. But if there's no one in Gaza, then guess who gets the claim to that? And that's exactly what a lot of Israeli politicians are saying now. They're saying that, I forget what her name, she was some media person, but she came out and said, well, either you take all the people of Gaza, all the 2 million Palestinians who are there, who might be just a wee bit upset at being kicked out of Gaza and might be just a little bit angry at the West for supporting Israel, and that Europe and the US and Canada, maybe New Zealand and Australia will have to take in the millions of Palestinians that they're going to forcibly move out. And they basically say, well, if you don't do that, then we have no choice but to wipe them out because blah, 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 October 7th, and that can never happen again, and we just have to kill them all then. That's kind of like what they've said basically overtly at this point. Now, if they do that, what would happen? Those would be very, very angry people, and those people will do bad stuff, and it's already starting to happen. Something I've never seen in my life is the media starting to turn against Israel. Now consider, I'm going to go back and read this again. Consider this part. World War III is to be fomented by using the differences between the agentur of the Malachians, right, instead of Illuminati, stir up between political Zionists and the leaders of the Muslim world. The war is to be directed in such a manner that Islam and political Zionism, including the state of Israel, will destroy themselves, while at the same time the remaining nations, once more divided against each other on this issue, will be forced to fight amongst themselves into a state of complete exhaustion mentally, physically, spiritually, and economically, right? One of the things that came out of Judaism, right, probably tracing back to Babylon, like everything else, is this concept of the scapegoat. And the scapegoat has actually been magically attached to the Jewish people. And that's why I always try and point this out to people. When people are first learning about all this stuff, right, it's very easy to come to the conclusion that, Jewish people run everything because the media and the bankers, right, without considering, why would you put your own people in the front? Wouldn't you have a goy front man if you really ran things? Wouldn't that be dangerous for you? Wouldn't that set you up for at some point to be the bag holder? That's what's happening here. And so they also want, the biblical prophecy that basically says almost all Jews will be wiped out, right? I often see Christians that are will be anti-Jewish but pro-Israel, and will overtly say they're hopeful that Israel is destroyed because then that heralds the coming of the Messiah, right? Both the Malachians and the Luciferians are making use of biblical prophecy, which is, both has validity on a spiritual level and inevitability, but is also used for mind control and political means. So if you look at what's happening with the way that the chessboard is being set up, it's very fascinating to me. And I will note that Trump, Javier Milei, what's her name, Maloney in Italy, and Wilders are all not Jewish. In fact, 3 of the 4 of them are blonde, which is interesting. And they, although it could be the one guy, the Wilders, I think peroxide bleach blondes his hair, but none of them are Jewish, but they're all super hardcore pro-Israel, without any hesitation. In fact, Millet down in Argentina claims to study the Torah every day. And he's like, oh, I want to be Jewish. I'm aspirationally Jewish, which sounds kind of anti-Semitic to me, actually, ironically and funnily enough. But what's to stop a millionaire from converting? He could do that anytime he wants. That guy has all the money in the world. Sure, it's not easy to, Judaism's not, they don't try and bring new people in. I forget what that's called. They don't evangelize, right? They actually do the opposite. But it is possible to become Jewish, especially if you're super wealthy and acclaimed. So why hasn't he? Interesting. So I see this, also this statement by the Israelis, that if you either take the Gazans or we're going to wipe them out. It reminds me very much of before the Holocaust, the Germans took this ship that was called the Ship of Fools, is what it ended up being called, and they filled it with Jewish people, and they sailed to different countries, and no country would take them. And he said, see, nobody wants them, and if nobody wants them, we'll have to take care of them, right? And a huge amount of the people on that ship tragically then did die in the Holocaust. And again, you have to just see regular people, whether they're Germans or they're British or they're Jewish, right? 90%, 95% of regular people of all religions and all nationalities, they might be traumatized and upset and angry, right? And propagandized, but they're not actually evil. But the people who are pulling the puppet strings at the top absolutely are. And they see all these different people, all these different nationalities as mere pawns in the chessboard that can be sacrificed at any time for the greater goal. That even includes like banks will be sacrificed in the upcoming, when the banking crisis happens, a lot of banks are going to fail. And there's a desire to like kind of liquidate a lot of the lower level banks and move it up to, the higher level banks like the IMF, World Bank, and BIS. Let's see here. Okay, so let's see. I already said that part. Empire of Russia, I already said that part. Yeah, so you can see how then that Leo Taxil document, and then the guy, what is his name? Guy Carr or something or other. William Guy Carr. You can see how what they wrote is like incredibly prophetic to the point of where it's hard to ignore how much they got right. What's interesting is that Leo Taxil claimed that those letters between Pike and Mazzini were in 1871, a few months after the founding of the Corporation of the United States. So, yeah, pretty interesting. And I did not expect Dominoes to start falling in Europe. And let me tell you something, Ireland is just the first. Just the Irish people are just much more, there's a lot more testosterone in the average Irishman, for sure, than the average Brit. And you don't like that, Brits? Well, start sacking up and, proving me wrong. I'm embarrassed by my own Scottish people haven't, kind of fought back, especially when the election was stolen a few years back, the Scottish referendum, which was just blatantly stolen by the British. The Scots didn't rise up. And if they did, they'd have the North Sea oil belongs to Scotland. If they would just kick the damn Brits out, they would be like one of the wealthiest countries in Europe. And so, yeah. All right, let's see what Freya said here. And thank you, Freya, for being so active on the channel. Freya always brings the thunder and drops hammers of truth. Like, she's just awesome. So let's see. Kissinger said Israel would be destroyed 10 years ago. They're way behind schedule. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, Kissinger is one of these people. He reminds me of a modern day Roy Cohn, in that he's at the center of all these intrigues. Roy was more at the center of national intrigue with maybe a slight bit with Israel. But Kissinger is actually, I would say he's the varsity squad Roy Cohn. He's at the globalist level, and he's an insider. And what's been horrifying to me the last several years is how Kissinger's been the voice of reason, telling people to pump the brakes on the madness. And when you have like frickin' dyed-in-the-wool war criminal Kissinger saying, whoa, 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 you're going too far there, guys. Like, maybe you've gone too far. So I'm opening it up now for Q&A. And so if anyone has any questions, I would love to hear them. Dave, thank you so much for the super sticker. If you have a question, Dave, I'd love to answer it. Alex, if you have any questions. Alex, by the way, pointed something out to me. Oh, this is something else I should talk about. Something very odd happened. And it did have the ring to me of magic. And at first, it seemed like it was a terrorist attack. But then it looks like now it was some kind of weird, bizarre accident. And that is that one of the bridges between Canada and the United States that is either in upstate New York or Michigan, I forget which, is called the Rainbow Bridge. Now, Rainbow Bridge is most famous to most people because it's the bridge to Asgard in Norse mythology. However, what's lesser well known is that one of the ways of accessing the astral realm, and in particular, sort of where the more fey creatures live, the astral forest, is also a rainbow bridge. So that bridge is called the Rainbow Bridge. And there was a weird, at first they thought it was a terrorist attack, and then video footage and eyewitness accounts have basically disproven that, and even the media backed off of it. It was a husband and wife who were driving like a $300,000 Bentley, and they were like maybe got in an argument, or who knows if, like, I don't know what this person's background is. If there's a computer in that Bentley, then I wonder if they didn't Michael Hastings him. Michael Hastings was the guy who was breaking open stuff in Afghanistan, and then his BMW or Mercedes, I think, had an onboard computer in it, and suddenly he was driving 120 miles an hour, and it was out of control. And in the Vault 7 documents that, what's his name, that Assange released, which was the last thing before he got raided in the embassy and arrested and taken into the Belmarsh prison, they admitted that the modern day, in the last episode I talked about planes being used for assassinations. One of the favorite assassination techniques now is to use cars. So it could be that that person, given that they had a $300,000 vehicle, is an important person, and that information hasn't come to light yet, and that was actually an assassination. But at the time, Alex was theorizing before more information came out that it was used because of the numerology of that date to sort of like start to bring in Ragnarok, right? Because there's an attack on the Rainbow Bridge in the Ragnarok mythos. What I think happened, because I do smell that smell of magic, what I think there was an assault trying to cut off some connection to the astral realm, doubtless by the forces of Moloch, because they're losing badly and getting their ass kicked up there, that he was probably trying to do some kind of attack, and using the Hermetic principle, as above, so below. The failed attack on the Rainbow Bridge manifested, and there was people whose minds were unguarded and angry and chaotic. I guess the guy was weirdly pissed off about not seeing a Kiss concert. Maybe he was going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs because he probably was, juiced up, because Gene Simmons, like the piece of trash sellout he is, pushed that really hard and said anyone who didn't get it should be thrown in prison or something like that, or worse. All right, so let's get to some of this comments. So the Rainbow Bridge connects Earth to Asgard, yes, but it also connects Earth to various parts of the astral realm. So I'm going to real quick show this. Josh Whitehall then says, I did some research on Guyana after our last discussion. Very interesting place, though I don't think I'd live near Georgetown. No, me either. I would live, anywhere I live, it's going to be rurally. We just talked about, where I recently got all my family passports just in case things get too dicey here for a while. I have a family. I have a son. I don't want them to be at any kind of risk. I can't risk them just for some kind of principled stand on my part. And also, there's a channel on here that's really interesting, run by a former Russian mafia guy called Grim Hustle, which is actually quite cool. I really like it. And he said at one point, and he was talking about it, thinking about like the Russian, all the chaos between 1991 and around 2000. He said, if it gets impossible to do business in your country and it gets to like hardcore totalitarian, leave your country, wait till the dust settles, come back, and then guide your country back to those good founding principles. And I was like, wow, that is really a good point. And with a family, that's not a bad tactic to take. And I'm kind of all about, and I think everyone should be surviving these next, 5 years. So yeah, they were pissed they couldn't go to a Kiss show. I know, like, what? Kiss sucks. Like, they have like 2 songs. And Gene Simmons is trash beyond trash. The Bentley was the flying spur. Can't make this shit up. Can you expand on that, UI guy 71? That's very interesting. Oh, this is Alex again. Oh, okay. But can you expand on the flying spur? I'm not familiar with that at all. And so, yeah, anyone who has any questions about Luciferians, Malachians, I don't want to, I'm not going to go into a lot of specifics about the Venetians. I'm just like kind of off that topic for a bit. Oh, the Flying Spur was the name of the car. Yeah, that's weird. That's super weird. And I went, what are you laughing about there, Freya? I'm curious. The Kiss, that a Kiss only has 2 good. Yeah, that's being generous, I might add. I kind of like that. That I'm gonna rock and roll all night and party every day when I was like 5 years old. I thought I just kind of, and I think that's kind of like who it's for. So it's just the name of the car, the Flying Spur. Well, that's interesting, especially considering that it ends up hitting a fence at like 120 miles an hour and going hurtling through the air before exploding on the Canadian-U.S. border. And yeah, pretty wild stuff. So Kiss is trash. Yeah, absolutely. It sure is, especially Gene Simmons. Yuck. That guy just has the worst vibe. He had this one episode of MTV's Cribs where like literally the entire episode was him trying to hawk Kiss merchandise and being like, oh, wow, here's a mint condition Gene Simmons doll. Wow, here's a mint condition, still in the plastic Gene Simmons poster. Oh, and you can get this for just $29.99. I was like, oh my God. So, okay. So again, Alex here says Kennedy was killed in a cat year. Huh? Cat by what calendar? 1122. This is a cat year as well. 1122. So is cat an alternative for rabbit in Chinese astrology? I've never heard that before. That's interesting. And then he goes on to say 22 is the master destroyer builder energy. I believe that's when the World War I armistice happened, which was really just kind of a pause between the two wars, as you've brought up before, Alex, in our discussions. Vietnamese Earth astrology says it's a cat year. Huh, interesting. And Freya said, I got to look into what happened in Ireland. Well, what's interesting about what happened in Ireland is that Conor McGregor, probably the most famous current Irishman now that Colin Firth or whatever has kind of fallen out of favor. Is it Colin Firth? Well, whatever. There's some other Irish actor who was like a heartthrob in the 2000s, early 2010s. I can't think of his name. He was in like the Alexander the Great movie and stuff. Or Bono, right? But probably the most currently famous Irishman on earth is Conor McGregor. And he said Ireland were at war mere hours before this crazy, he's from somewhere in the Islamic world. I think he's Moroccan, perhaps. Migrant started stabbing these children, and then a woman who was a school teacher tried to stab him, or tried to stop him, and then he stabbed her too. And then some other immigrant, I'm not sure, possibly from the Muslim world, just goes to show there's good people in every group, right? Like even coming in these waves, a lot of the people don't know about the machinations. They just want to get a better life. Well, this guy was some sort of immigrant, and he was like a bicyclist delivery driver, and he took off his helmet and hit the guy in the back of the head as hard as he could, knocking him out stone cold. Well, there's then been massive riots in Dublin, lighting cars on fire, and they've been trying to attack like centers where the migrants are, attacking migrant buses. I guess they sent in military units even, and that was after they deployed 3,000 police. And they try to say, oh, it's so bad and racist and blah, blah, and the far right and blah, blah. And they just don't acknowledge that this is far from the first stabbing incident of one of these George Soros, NGO immigrant people who were sent there exactly for the purpose of, first of all, weakening and harming, Ireland and other European countries, but also in creating enmity between Europeans and Muslims to the point to where we can basically have Crusades 2.0 and take over the Arabian Peninsula. And probably in the process, Israel gets obliterated, right, in order to fulfill biblical prophecy. And, I'm of the opinion that a lot of the Bible is massively manipulated, both the Jewish part, which a lot of that came from the Babylonian priesthood, not just that they cribbed Genesis from the Sumerians and the Babylonians, but also that the Babylonians, during the first and second enslavement, Abraham's enslavement, and then again with Nebuchadnezzar, the second later, I think those are the two ones, that there was injected into the proto-Judaism a lot of this Babylonian trash that would become the Babylonian Talmud, which is not in congruence at all with the Torah, which it has lots of beautiful stuff like Psalms and so forth. The Babylonian Talmud is just vile. Someone asked me the other day to talk about Chabad and Trump, and I will just say this about Chabad. I went on there trying to do some research on the origins of the Babylonian Talmud, and they were like, this beautiful book, the Babylonian Talmud. And I'm like, Like, how could you possibly say that? Are there some good parts in that 30,000 page long thing? I'm sure there are, but there's also like, hey, pedophilia is just fine. Oh, you want to enslave and rape goys? Go right ahead. You want to like enslave them with usury? That's great. They're there as cattle. Like, that's where all the like most negative stuff that the far right reactionaries use to try and make all Jews look bad, right? And which certain sects of Judaism really love that stuff, all the bigoted supremacist stuff. But Chabad on their website said, oh, this beautiful book. And they had no caveats about, of course, we disavow the following sections, which are just absolutely nightmarish and cause the skin to peel back on your face, you know. There's even something in part of the extended Talmud where they say that, this is very contentious, but they say that they resurrected Jesus the Nazarene, and he because he went against the Jewish faith was boiling in excrement, right? That's another thing that the right-wing reactionaries who, you know, are trying to fuel anti-Jewishness, they like to quote that. I don't know. I think it has a grain of truth. It's contentious. There's a lot of stuff that's very odd about the translation, or it was put in after the fact in brackets. I've seen some pretty good takedown of that, saying that it's very questionable. But what's interesting is that it remains on a lot of mainstream Jewish sites that have that particular passage, which is astonishing to me, which again looks to me like this long-term setup to discredit Judaism by these Malachians. So let's see. I have to drop, but we'll listen tonight. Picked up a charting today. Everyone should take advantage of the sale. Oh, hey, thank you, Alex. I look forward to doing your chart. Fantastic. I'm sure you'll love it. It'll be great. Yeah, one of the things that I include in chart readings is this is my magical Mercury ring. And it has, you can see that it has let's see if it'll, come on. Oh, come on. Clarify on the ring. Oh, I'm trying to get it to zoom in right. One is this is the Sanskrit for Mercury, and then I have a series of triskelions, and then I actually don't want to reveal that, but that's my personal sigil on the other side. But the main point of it is the emerald. And so as a Virgo rising in Vedic astrology in my natal chart, right, which I'm out of that now, but you stay in your natal chart to some degree into your 40s, right? It depends on how much you integrate your shadow and how much you deal with the wounds of your natal chart is how much you can realize the promise of your Navamsa or second half of life chart. But in my natal chart, it rules my first house, which is like personal will and destiny and dharma and body and just sort of charisma and all things that have to do with who you are and your sense of self and your ability to like realize the power of your chart. And the 10th house of career and public persona. And that's why it's on my pinky. I'm not generally a big fan of pinky rings, but the pinky, Mercury rules the pinky. And then in my second half of life chart, it's the second lord of income and the fifth lord of children and past life karma and past life credit. And it also is involved in many yogas or yokes of destiny that are very positive for me in my chart. And so when you wear a Vedic ring, you can really empower whatever planet. And I will get more at some point. One of my clients loved his reading so much and all the work I did so much that he paid for half of this ring, which I will tell you they are quite expensive. There's also Sanskrit mantras you can do that will help basically help your karmas. And the other thing that you can do is that your chart has the 6th, 8th, and 12th houses, which are all very bad. So like the 6th house is enemies and jealous people, right? But it's also health and healing. The 8th house, and I'm a very 8th house person. This channel's, primarily 8th house, right? It's the hidden, the occult, the esoteric, the mystical, sexuality, tantra. It's basically where the spiritual realm and the physical realm interact. It's also deep psychology, sexuality, sex drive, how much Kundalini energy force you have. And I have a super stocked 8th house, both in my natal chart and in my Navamsa. And so it also means loss and death and betrayal. And that's what I experienced all in my natal chart because it was basically unconscious to me. And as I began to lean in consciously into the 8th house dynamics, suddenly the beautiful positive aspects of the 8th house came to fruition. What I realized by doing that myself, and I've advised people, and it's worked very well for them, is that it's like you have 10,000 volts of electricity that have to come through. And if you're unconscious, it'll come in the form of a basically loss and things to stagger you. Like 12th house is drug addiction and imprisonment and hospitals, but it's also final liberation and transcendent spirituality, not mystical spirituality like the 8th house, but 12th house transcendent spirituality like in Hinduism or Buddhism, where you're trying to transcend the world. It's also sex. It's interesting. The two bad houses are the sex houses. I have a very powerful 12th house, 12th lord, but it's also foreigners and foreign lands. And so sometimes people have really prominent 12th houses. They would do well to go to foreign lands. And so I teach people how to hack your chart so that way you can lean into the positive indications of these negative charts. And suddenly your life can just take this 180-degree turn, which is exactly what happened to me when I started doing that. So let's see what Freya says. Freya says, yeah, and I don't think the Bible's as old as they claim either. Well, I mean, depends on which translation you're talking about, right? You know, certainly like the different translations and edits over the years are certainly quite new. I don't know. It's really hard to tell. It's like one of the most contentious areas of scholarship, biblical scholarship, and like all the data on both sides, both the Malachian atheist agenda and also the you know, sort of Luciferian agenda, like they or the Christian agenda, right? People want to say, oh, the Bible's literally true, word for word. There's nothing in it that's even slightly wrong. Just all the scholarship around the biblical text and biblical history is, in my opinion, very tainted by ideology. Much like when you read, you know, like I saw someone trying to debunk Khazaria, and he cherry-picked data and ignored other data, also by Israelis and Jews, that showed that Khazaria was the source of the Ashkenazi wave of immigration, especially to Germany, which is where you then get Yiddish, right? They try and say, oh, Yiddish proves that, therefore, it's the people of David. What? No, it doesn't. It proves that people lived in Germany for a period of time. Third-generation Vietnamese people barely speak Vietnamese. They speak English, bro. So if you move there and you stay in Germany for a long time, of course, you're going to speak some kind of like Germanic root language that's probably mixed with something else. And so this guy just totally cherry-picked all this stuff. And so data around, you know, where the Ashkenazi Jews comes from also needs to be looked at on both sides with a very skeptical lens. And that's what I feel about all biblical scholarship, is that there's a lot of agendas around it. And so therefore you have to be very discerning and really look at all the data. And just at the end of the day, you have to trust your own inner guidance because, you know, and I mean, that really is, I remember in the early 2000s, I said, discernment is the key, said to some friends, I think discernment will be the key trait of the 21st century in the information age. Boy, did I have no idea how true that would become. All right, let's see here. Similar prisoner says, is there a particular stone that corresponds with late July Leo sign? Well, see, that's just it. You don't want to willy-nilly put on Vedic gemstones, because if you do, let's say you got a ruby, right? And you're like, man, rubies are expensive. Oh, I'll get this affordable ruby that's super cracked, right? Has a lot of flaws in it. And let's say you're a Leo rising. And so then that's your first house, right? Your sun sign is kind of meaningless. I mean, that doesn't tell me anything. It could rule anything from the worst house, the 12th house, which if you empowered that, which is what the ring does, unlike the Sanskrit mantra, just gets rid of the negatives and only has the positives. Mantras have a very high floor, but kind of a low ceiling, and rings have an extremely high ceiling, but an incredibly low floor that goes down the bedrock. Wherein if you were a Leo rising, and therefore it's your first house, and you wore a very cracked, cheap ruby, you might have horrible health problems because the first house rules the body. And if you wore a cracked ring, and God forbid it was a 12th house ruler and you wore a cracked one, then like, let's say you had a 12th Lord sun, right? That you would then be a Virgo rising and you have a 12th Lord sun and you had that in the 7th house of partner, it could literally give your wife cancer. Famously, Yogananda's teacher, Sri Yukteswar, he was super psychic, and apparently he could see, and this makes sense to me actually, because when you're looking at an astrology chart, you're really looking at someone's karmas. And so he could see the causal or karmic body around someone. And so he could essentially see their chart. And he saw this guy walking down the street wearing a sapphire bangle. Blue sapphires are ruled by Saturn, or Saturn is related to the blue sapphire. And so Sri Yukteswar stopped the man and said, why are you wearing that? And the guy said, oh, well, an astrologer told me to wear it. And he said, no, you need to take that off immediately. That'll kill your mother. And he said, oh, I don't think so, random guy in the street, not really knowing who Sri Yukteswar was, the Yogananda's teacher, and the man ignored him. And a few weeks later, they bumped into each other again, and his mom had died suddenly. And it was because it was like the 12th Lord Saturn, so a double dose of negativity. Saturn isn't always negative, but for a chart, unless that the Saturn rules good houses in that chart, Saturn is what's called a natural malefic, like the sun is, right? So Ruby and the sun, it's a natural malefic. You got to be very careful with this stuff, and you really need expert advice from me or some other Vedic astrologer, and be very, very careful about it. And you're going to have to throw down the cash to get a high quality stone. Like, again, I would not have been able to afford this emerald. Emeralds are phenomenally expensive. If it wasn't for a very wealthy client of mine, you know who you are if you happen to watch this, and thank you again humbly. If you go for a cheap stone, it can really screw you over, because in this case, it was a 12th Lord Saturn, right? Saturn ruled the 12th house. And so it was like a Pisces rising person, and their 12th Lord Saturn was in the 4th house of mother. And that's how he knew that this sapphire that he was wearing would straight up kill the guy's mother. And that's what happened. So do not mess around with this, and don't try and just figure it out on your own. You don't need to come to me, but if you're thinking of getting one of these stones, you should really talk to a Vedic astrologer. In fact, I think often of the fact that all these women wear diamonds, right? Wear diamond engagement rings. Now, Venus is a natural benefic, so all things being equal, it's probably good. But for some people, like a Gemini rising, Venus rules the 12th Lord, the 12th house. And if you had that in, say, the 7th house, again, that could like mean that woman's husband dies in a car wreck not too long after, or I mean, her fiance dies in a car wreck, because let's say it's like there's some interaction between 4th Lord vehicles and 12th Lord, the killing house of partner, or 7th Lord, right? Like say the 12th Lord and the 7th Lord were conjunct in the 4th house. That then could cause, it'd be especially devastating for a Gemini, because then that would be a fall in the 4th house of Virgo, say conjunct the 7th Lord, husband dies in a car wreck, because you just strengthen the negative aspect of that stone. So I wonder all the time when I see women wearing big fat diamonds, if that's actually negative for them. If it's positive, which it is for probably 2/3 or 3/4 of people, then it's probably really positive, because Jupiter is the great benefic and Venus is just a step below that in terms of naturally being good. You do not mess around with this stuff. I mean, it's funny, but all the gems that people love to wear, diamonds. So real quick, we'll go from the center. Sun is ruby. Mercury is emerald. I'm a very mercurial person, fast mind, talk too much, as I get that comment all the time, right? And then Venus is ruled by diamond. They're secondary stones, but they're less powerful, and you have to wear bigger, almost costume jewelry level size to get the same benefit. And I don't super recommend those. I'm kind of like either go for the gold or don't. The secondary stone, the one stone that I advise at all is Venus, just because I hate the De Beers, and then there's the other Jewish cartel, which are both kind of nasty, and they overvalue diamonds and make them super stupid expensive when they shouldn't be. They're very common, actually. The secondary stone for Venus is white sapphire. And then for Mars, or well, I guess next would be Moon. Moon is natural pearl, not tissue nucleated, right? Which is almost all pearls now are tissue nucleated. That is, they're created by putting something in the middle of an oyster and forcing it to grow a pearl. But a natural pearl that naturally forms in the ocean through natural processes, that's the Moon's primary stone. Then you have Mars, and people who have a positive Mars are really lucky, because this is the one cheap one that you can get for a few hundred or several $100s rather than thousands, and that's red coral. And then Jupiter is yellow sapphire, and then Saturn is blue sapphire, and then Rahu and Ketu are Hessonite and Cat's Eye. And you generally don't want to wear Rahu and Ketu stones unless you're in a Rahu or Ketu Mahadasha. So that's a major planetary time period where the karmas of that planet come to fruition. And so it's a very complicated thing. And that's why when Alex was talking about that he was going to get a chart from me today, which is awesome. I haven't seen that alert yet. I'm running a 15% sale today. And here, I'll put that up as well. When he said that, I said that I do the gemstone recommendations. I also give all the mantras for free. and tell you which mantras are appropriate for you. That's kind of the thing, is that if you have lots of time but not lots of money, you can do the mantras. And that you can do on your own. That you can figure out on your own. You got to have enough of working knowledge of Vedic astrology to know what to strengthen, right? Which is, it's a very deep science, right? There's an art to it, which is the part I'm really good at. But the science part alone is, something like a third of all the books over on the shelf over there are Vedic astrology books. There's the main hardcore major books, but then lots of people have given practical experience. I really love this book on Rahu Ketu by Prash Trivedi. Fantastic book. But you can learn. Mantras won't harm you. Even if you mispronounce them, whatever kind of thing, mantras can't harm you. But gemstones can. So you need to be real careful with gemstones. I also give a 10% discount because I'm an affiliate of the biggest Vedic gemstone merchandiser in the US. And it is actually really the only one that I work with. That's where I got my stone. I wouldn't get it from anyone else, just because you also don't want, like, a lot of times with rubies and sapphires, they heat them to change the color or oil them, and then that reduces the efficacy. And you need to have the stone touching your skin. The stone touches my skin. It's quite complicated. And so I do that as part of the chart. But the mantras are free, and they just take a lot of time. So let's see here. More questions. Where's the best place to start to help hack our charts? Well, probably getting a reading from me. If you want to learn it on your own, it's the 6th, 8th, and 12th houses. You'll notice that like 3/4 of it are negative and about 1/4 are positive. And if you have a prominent 12th, 6th, or 8th lord, you would then lean into the positives of those. But it's a very complicated, it's not a simple question. I'm still learning. I've been studying it diligently and really intensely since 2007, 16 years. And, I agree with Socrates. I know that I do not know much. Like, the more you learn, if you're honest, the more you realize you don't really fucking know much at all. It's like super deep. So let's see. The book of Job seems to be filled with agendas. Yeah, the book of Job is like one of the most fascinating in the Bible. And that's one of those things where you see that there's a partnership, weirdly, between God and Lucifer and Satan are all kind of doing their own things. And it's all an agenda to bring about the increase in consciousness in humanity. And the funny thing is that until you get to Christianity and Islam, basically every major religion on earth believed in reincarnation. Buddhism does overtly. Hinduism does overtly. I've read tons of stuff that Judaism seems to say this. Even in the Bible, a little bit got past the editors. And people asked Jesus, they said, well, if you're the Messiah, Isaiah was supposed to return first. And he said, yes, you know him as John the Baptist. And John the Baptist is a huge figure. He's a central figure for Templar. When they had the Templar trials, they said, oh, the Templar worship a skull. Well, that skull represented, or actually was, the skull of John the Baptist, who was beheaded. And the Templar put John the Baptist on a similar plane to Jesus, which is astonishing and very interesting. And so even in the Bible, there is a couple hints at reincarnation that Jesus said. I forget what the other one is, but that's the main one. But if you look at, if you believe in reincarnation, right, instead of one and done and then either eternal hell or eternal heaven, which is very motivating, which is exactly why Constantine made Christianity, with some heavy edits, the religion of the Roman Empire, was precisely because he noticed the Christians fought like lions, which is funny because the Christians were fighting lions in Rome prior to that, thanks to the Roman Empire trying to kill the Christians. That was the other thing, is that they couldn't get rid of the Christian cult. It was incredibly resilient. And so the resilience, plus they fought like, there was this legion of Christians that fought incredibly hard. And supposedly Constantine had a vision, under this sign I will conquer, and it showed the cross. I don't buy that for a minute. That's propaganda. It's bullshit. But he saw they fought really hard, and he goes, why do they fight so hard? And one of them says, oh, well, in their religion, they believe that if they fight really hard, they go to heaven. So if you only believe in a one and done life, you're going to have very different motivations than if you believe that you reincarnate all the time. Also, people say, oh, why do bad things happen all the time? Well, if you get to reincarnate all the time, and what's truly you cannot be harmed, then you start to look at life as a spiritual journey, and lifetimes as a journey of spirit through the flesh and learning things here in the material world. And then you come to a very different realization. And then the book of Job makes a lot more sense. And then things like the different mystery schools, right? Like you have the evil Malachians, you have the Luciferians, you have the Most High. And then I will at some point do this. The fourth group is the non-dual group. And so there's a claim, and I'll just give a little teaser for that episode here, there's a long-standing claim that there's these 7 immortal sages that live somewhere hidden in the Himalayas in Shangri-La, or I forget what the other one, Aghorta or whatever it is, Ahora, something like Aghora, something like that. The hollow earth, right? Not flat earth, but hollow earth, right? That one is much more ancient, and that at least means like a honeycombed earth where there's like ancient tunnel systems. Like, for example, the Hopi say that they're from Tibet, and they do have linguistic markers showing that's similar to ancient Tibetan. And they say that they went underground to avoid a disaster and then popped up out of the caves there in New Mexico. And the Mayans also say they came out of caves, their ancestors. And so this honeycombed earth thing, but they say that there's these 7 sages, and they sit there and they look at this reflecting pool and they see all world events. They're like tapped into the, oh gosh, what's that thing called? Oh, the Akashic records, but they also are seeing in real-time world events happen. And then they manipulate the good secret societies, the Luciferian or gray hat central or, neutral societies, and the Malachian societies. And they use that to guide the destiny of humanity, including wars and all the bad stuff. And that I can tie that into 2 things I said earlier in this episode. One, Yogananda's teacher was Sri Yukteswar. His teacher was Lahiri Mahayasa. And Lahiri Mahayasa claimed that his teacher was Babaji, this blue-skinned immortal avatar who could phase in and out of existence and create things out of his own will, and that he was one of these 7 sages. And when Giuseppe Manzini and Albert Pike were talking with one another, and this part I believe is not, people don't argue about this, he said, there is another group beyond even us, and he was the head of the Bavarian Illuminati at the time. He said, there's a greater force out there, and nobody knows who it is. We speak of it in whispers and we all fear it. And my theory is that he was actually referring to these non-dual secret societies that, of course, if you're evil-minded, you would see as a greater evil. If you're good-minded, you would either see as a greater evil or hope that it was good. And I believe that one of the hints we have about these non-dual mystery schools that are in the Himalayas is Gurdjieff talked about the Sarmung Brotherhood. And he seemed to be very neutral. Like, he did very weird things. He worked for different intelligence agencies, and then he brought all this beautiful, wonderful stuff forward. And he claimed to have been trained by a Sarmung Brotherhood somewhere in Central Asia. And in fact, the Nazis were looking for these 7 sages in the reflecting pool. And some people say these 7 sages, again, this is more of my personal theory. I should couch it that way. That the Saptarishis, right, that I talked about in the Bibu Dev Misra thing, where the Saptarishis bring the whole concept of yugas with them. Or there's the 7 sages that pop out of the ocean, according to the Sumerians, and they wear something like a fish head armor, or sometimes they're shown as wearing like a eagle head, right? Which both of those could be symbolic. It could be that some came down in flying craft and some came out of submarines, but that these 7 sages appear all over the world, including the Americas, and that they reseed civilization after the fall of Atlantis and the disaster there. I wonder if those 7 sages aren't these same immortal 7 sages that live up in the Himalayas. It's odd to me that that number keeps coming up. And that is the deepest mystery on this planet. It's deeper and less documented than the UFO mystery, which is, you kind of go from political machinations, then you get up to the spiritual level of, right, there's like Malachians and Luciferians. And then beyond that level of secrecy is the UFO phenomenon, which there's all sorts of weird stuff. Is it interdimensional beings? Are they off planet? Is it ancient technology, right? Is it all 3, which is actually what I think it is. But the layer even beyond that is the non-dual mystery schools. It's the most mysterious thing. And based on decades of research, it's kind of the ultimate secret. And I know that they even have non-dual mystery schools at a much lower level. And all these different groups, the Malachians, the Luciferians, the most high mystery schools, right? So those are the ones who really use magic overtly, right? And work on it together. They recruit from things like Masonry, American Rosicrucian movement. They look for talented individuals and they pull them up out of those groups. All 3, but so did the non-duals. But they're much more choosy and it's much more rare because you have to have a very specific kind of psyche that is quite rare. Probably only really India has a lot of people with that mentality of beyond good and evil, the Advaita Vedanta, Ramana Maharshi, Sri Ramakrishna, that kind of like non-dual reality. Maybe there might be some Buddhist people that get pulled into it. But it takes a very, very ultra rare. These are the rarest. Like the most common, although it's changing now, but the most common consciousness on earth is Malachianism, unfortunately. Most people are just stuck in a state of fearful survival. And then the layer above that is Luciferian. Well, what's in it for me? I want to realize some higher ideals, right? I want to be more spiritual and more intellectual and improve the material condition on earth. And we should have rule of law. It shouldn't just be might makes right. It shouldn't just be slavery and the powerful just abuse the weak, right? It should be more noble than that. But of course, we're the best, so we should be in charge, right? And then there's the Most High, which is very rare. And that's people who are, most people aren't really in that state of consciousness. And if they are, they're probably like homeless or in a mental institution or slaving away in some, nonprofit someplace and getting no credit. Nobody's paying attention to them because they don't care. Right? They're non-egoic. They don't care. But the rarest of all is non-dual. And the non-dual people, are like, hey, escape the wheel of samsara, elevate to a higher level. And that philosophy and spirituality very much attracted me for a long, long time. And I actually really love it. I do think it is ultimately the best for the individual, right? It's that small craft, not Mahayana, but whatever the opposite of that is, the small vehicle where you just leave and go, right? Which is what Buddha said, don't come back like I did. Once you become enlightened, go, right? So that's the rarest level of consciousness. And it appealed to me for a long time, but then I realized I love being on earth. I don't mind reincarnating here, and I'm going to use whatever God-given talents I have to try and bring about the golden age on earth. And I'm going to be doing an upcoming episode on golden age enclaves right before Christmas. I think it's a great time to do it. People often ask me, well, what are you supposed to do as someone who's most high aligned if there's this huge fight between Malachians and Luciferians? Well, first and foremost, survive, right? Survive for you and your family. Get savvy, take care of the material things, get yourself right internally. But what are we going to do? Well, we want to flourish. When the Luciferians take over, we want to flourish. So take care of your finances, right? Gold, silver, certain select crypto, right? If you're into that kind of thing, land, right? But eventually the difference between the Luciferians and the Malachians are the Luciferians will allow most high people, if they don't challenge them for power, they'll allow them to do their own thing. As long as they don't try and take over the culture or fight them overtly. If you try and do either of those, the Luciferians will have a right to defend themselves. And it's natural law that they're going to, rule. So challenging them would just be foolish, in my opinion. But what you can do is create golden age enclaves. You can create communities where people are resonating at the most high level. And that'll create the seeds for the golden age culture that'll spring into existence 6,000 years from now. Because just as Malachians eventually give way to the Luciferians via violence, the Luciferians improving the standard of conditions for humanity and encouraging spirituality and self-improvement, that then creates the conditions for true wisdom to arise. And wisdom is more powerful than intelligence. The Malachians are basically physical, might makes right. The Luciferians are about the intellect. And most high people are about wisdom and compassion. And that'll be, this 6,000 years from now, when we're on the Silver Age, Golden Age cusp, the Luciferian thing will be falling away because as a collective, we'll be done with the Luciferian era and all the hollow narcissism and trying to put ourselves before God. Instead, we'll put God first. And from that, we'll be naturally harmonious and we'll uplift things. So we'll be able to create these golden age enclaves in the years to come. And that's what literally my magnum opus, what my life purpose is to do exactly that. And it's not like I'm going to do it by myself. I'll be one of millions of people worldwide who will do this. And my part might be very insignificant, but that's what I'm going to dedicate my life to. So let's see. You're a 3-life path, 3rd letter, communication, comedian, etc. Hence good with the talking. A little too good, some of the commenters say. Thank you, though, Alex. Alex is a numerologist. By the way, Alex, we're setting up a angelic magic class signal chat group, and I'll give you that information later. One of the other guys in one of the other classes set that up, and I'm excited to have your expertise there when you watch this later. Let's see here. Thanks for the heads up and in-depth info. No worries, similar prisoners. And again, if you want to get a reading from me, then I would love to do that. I do shorter readings, but I really recommend the depth of the Natal and Navamsa charts. I promise you. I one time had a severe complaint about the chart, and it was that the woman was very upset. She had a lot of trauma when she was younger, and she claimed, I said, so was it not accurate? She said it was too accurate, and it made me really upset. And so she didn't pay me. I back then used to let people pay me half up front instead of the full price, and I can't do it anymore because of people like this woman. She refused to pay me the second half, and then she just came back a few months ago and said, everything you said came to pass, and I want more advice and I want more reading. And I said, oh, well, no, you didn't pay me, so you burned that bridge when you didn't pay me, and that was, not acceptable. So Natal and Navamsa charts, Black Friday 23 is the 15% off code. One day only, 15% of 444,666. Oh, well, that was unintentional. I didn't want to quite do 20% just because that's very creepy and unintentional. I didn't want to do 20% off just because I'm needing to drum up some extra cash for my family. I want to get my son something nice. It's Christmas time. I will tell you guys that I am about to raise my prices for 2024. I just can't keep up with the grocery store bill. Like, I try and feed my family all organic, and it's so expensive now with Biden. Thank you, Freya. I appreciate it. I always appreciate your brilliant commentary. Freya, always read her comments. They're always super insightful. Although, well, I won't throw it under the bus like that. You know what comment I'm talking about, Freya. Freya said a comment that freaked me out a while back. Wow, that is some deep stuff. Thank you for that insight into the book of Job, etc. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate it. Yeah. I had someone say the other day, I'd like to see how smart this guy is without cheat sheet in front of him. It's like, or not on a computer. How am I supposed to do that? We're going to do a literal Telegram chat? Stop. Ian's talking too much. Stop. Ian continues to fill air. Stop. Like, how am I supposed to prove that to you, bro? Like, and also, this isn't a memory retention channel. This is, I think, hopefully what I provide is some kind of insight and different analysis than you'd get elsewhere, thanks to the grace of the angels and the Most High. That's the point. It's not to show off that, I do think I know a bit more about history and esoteric than most people, but, I don't know shit compared to a lot of historians, and I don't know shit compared to a lot of esoteric people. Those are two of the deepest fields of study in humanity. I just try and do the best I can and hopefully offer some value to people who watch the channel. So I just thought that was a funny comment. I was like, why would you even say that, dude? Like, what a weird insult. I always leave up comments unless they're like particularly hateful or nasty, and then I do delete those, but I just don't respond. I do answer all comments pretty much, unless someone says something that's either very contentious and me talking about it get me in trouble. I have to be careful. Or if someone, 9 times out of 10 when I don't respond, it's because someone says something really mean or like whatever kind of thing. Or once in a while people put up like a stumper to where I just can't really answer the question without like something more, without maybe broaching a difficult topic, or I just don't have enough information. So that is the end of the questions. And so I think I'm just going to go ahead and tie it off here. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. If you are interested in a Vedic astrology session, and that's weird about the loss in price, the price of the full reading does not end up to being that bad number, thankfully. Although that number kind of gets, there's some confusion on what that number really means. But just type in Black Friday, all caps 23. It only lasts till midnight tonight. You can even get a shorter, an hour intuitive session if you want, and we could focus on gems there. But again, gems, very risky, very awesome, very powerful to have, a straight up magic ring. I actually got to meet the guy. Weirdly enough, this guy lives where I do, which is insane because the company is across the country. But I got to meet him, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm meeting. Oh gosh, now I'm gonna blank on his name. Well, I said the right name to him, but the name of Fëanor, the original ringsmith who taught Sauron, the immortal elf in the first age who taught Sauron ringcraft, the guy who made the Silmarils. Yes, I am a little nerdy if you haven't noticed. But anyways, it's a very deep thing, and don't do rings if you don't know what you're doing. Whether you get a guidance from me or another Vedic astrologer, doesn't matter. Sure, I'd love to have you come work with me, but it doesn't matter. You can go to whoever you want. Just make sure they're good and competent if you're going to do the gemstone remedies. Otherwise, the mantras for planets, those are available online for free, and I do give those always to clients. In fact, if someone wants to just even ask me for what mantra. I'm not going to tell you what mantra you need for your chart. I'm sorry, that's a reading. You know, I'm not going to do work for free, but I will give you those resources for free because I don't want anyone to be held back due to lack of funds. So much love, everyone. I'm just going to check and see if there's any more questions. This is the last comment. So much love, everyone. Take advantage of the Black Friday sale. One day only. It does end tonight at midnight Pacific Coast time. So if you're on the East Coast, you have till 3 a.m. Thank you so much, and see you guys all again soon. All right. Bye-bye.